Welcome to the Native History channel, where we cover topics relating to Native history, Native Americans, and all sorts of things. Today, we're going to be doing a video about Crazy Horse. Crazy Horse was a Lakota warrior and leader of the Oglala Lakota tribe, who lived during the mid to late 19th century. He's remembered for his courage, his military tactics, and for his leadership in resisting the United States government's attempts to take over Lakota lands. Crazy Horse was born in 1840, near Rapid Creek in what is now South Dakota. As a young man, he became a warrior and gained a reputation for his skill in battle. He played a significant role in the resistance against the U.S. Army's invasion of the Black Hills in the 1860s and 1870s. He was one of the key leaders in the Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876, also known as Custer's Last Stand. He led a decisive charge during that battle that contributed to the defeat of General Custer and his troops. In 1877, however, Crazy Horse surrendered to the U.S. Army, with the understanding that his people and him would be allowed to return to their homeland. However, he was betrayed and arrested, leading to his death in captivity later in 1877. Crazy Horse, however, remains a revered figure among the Lakota and the American populace at large, remembered for his bravery, his leadership, and his resistance to the forced assimilation of his people. But who were the Lakota prior to the birth of the Crazy Horse? The Lakota, also known as the Sioux, are a native tribe that originated from the Great Plains of North America. Prior to European contact, they lived a nomadic lifestyle, relying on hunting and gathering for their livelihoods. In the mid-17th century, the Lakota began acquiring horses from Spanish explorers, which allowed them to expand their hunting grounds and become more mobile. By the early 19th century, the Lakota had become one of the most powerful tribes on the Great Plains. But in the middle of the 19th century, the U.S. government began to expand westward, leading to conflicts with the Lakota over land and resources. They negotiated treaties with the Lakota, but these agreements were often broken, and the government continued to encroach on Lakota lands. In 1868, the U.S. government signed the Fort Laramie Treaty with the Lakota, establishing the Great Sioux Reservation, an area covering much of present-day South Dakota, North Dakota, and Nebraska. However, gold was discovered in the Black Hills, this sacred area to the Lakota, leading to a renewed conflict between the two groups. Crazy Horse was born within this tumultuous time and grew up witnessing the U.S. government's increasing encroachment on Lakota lands. He became a warrior and leader of his people, fighting against the U.S. Army in defense of his homeland. As I just mentioned, the U.S. Army invaded the Black Hills in the 1860s and 70s primarily because of the discovery of gold in the region. Specifically, this led to a rush of miners and settlers into the area, which in turn led to increased pressure on the U.S. government to take control of the land. The Black Hills were considered sacred by the Lakota, who had again been granted ownership of the land in the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1868. But the discovery of gold led to the government reneging on this treaty and forcibly removing the Lakota from the area. This led to increased tensions between the Lakota and the U.S., and they fought to protect their homeland. These tensions ultimately led to the Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876, in which again Crazy Horse played a key role in defeating General Custer. The U.S. government continued to take control of Lakota lands in the decades that followed, leading to further conflicts and displacement of the Lakota people. The struggle over the Black Hills and the ongoing legacy of this conflict remains an important part of Lakota history and identity. I've mentioned that Crazy Horse had a big role in the victory at the Battle of Little Bighorn, but what exactly did he do? Also known as Custer's Last Stand, the Battle of Little Bighorn took place on June 25th and June 26th, 1876. During the battle, Crazy Horse led a decisive charge that contributed to the defeat of George Custer. Along with other Lakota and Cheyenne warriors, Crazy Horse engaged in a specific strategy of encircling and overwhelming the U.S. Army forces. Many believe that he led a charge on Custer's troops from the north, which helped to divide and confuse the U.S. Army's forces. Crazy Horse's charge was a critical moment in the battle, as it helped to disorient and disrupt all of their defenses. According to some accounts, Crazy Horse himself may have killed several U.S. soldiers during the charge. The Battle of Little Bighorn was a significant victory for the Lakota and the Cheyenne, and it remains an important moment in the history of Native American resistance. You might also be wondering about Crazy Horse's relationship to another extremely famous Lakota leader of the 19th century, namely Sitting Bull. These two were probably the two most well-known and prominent leaders of the Lakota during the late 19th century, and they were both instrumental in resisting U.S. government policies that sought to take control of Lakota lands and force assimilation. However, they were not closely related, although they shared this common vision for the Lakota people. They both believed in the importance of protecting Lakota lands and the way of life, and they were both willing to fight against the U.S. government forces to do so. During the Battle of Little Bighorn, Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull both worked together to coordinate the Lakota and Cheyenne forces. Crazy Horse, as we've just mentioned, played a key role in the battle, while Sitting Bull provided spiritual and strategic guidance to the Lakota and Cheyenne forces. After the battle, both Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull continued to resist U.S. government policies, but their own relationship was not always smooth. They had disagreements about how to best protect their people, disagreeing about the level of militancy required to do so. Despite these differences, however, they are both still extremely well regarded in Lakota history. I've said they were both leaders, but this sort of you need to know what about Lakota governance methods allowed for such a system. Like many native tribes, the Lakota had a complex system of leadership that was based on consensus and shared decision-making. It was really then not uncommon for there to be multiple leaders or chiefs within the tribe, each with their own areas of expertise and responsibilities. Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull were both prominent leaders within the Lakota tribe during the late 19th century, but they had different responsibilities. Crazy Horse was a military leader and a warrior, while Sitting Bull was a spiritual leader and a kind of tactician. Both men, however, were very highly respected in the Lakota community, and they worked together and separately, complementing each other in important ways. Having multiple leaders was a common practice in many native tribes and allowed for a more diverse range of perspectives and expertise to be represented in decision-making. It was not necessarily a hierarchical system, but rather one based on collaboration. Now, just a word here about the history of the Lakota since the death of Crazy Horse in 1877. Since then, the Lakota has continued to have conflict and struggle with the U.S. government, as well as efforts to preserve and revitalize their culture and traditions. Following the Battle of Little Bighorn, the U.S. government intensified its efforts to control Lakota lands and force assimilation onto the Lakota people. This included the forced removal of Lakota children from their families and placement in boarding schools designed to erase their language and culture. Throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the U.S. government continued to take control of Lakota lands, often through deceptive and coercive means, such as the breaking of treaties and the forced relocation of people to reservations. Despite these challenges, the Lakota continued to resist and adapt, preserving their culture and traditions in the face of adversity. In the mid-20th century, there was a renewed interest in Native American rights and sovereignty, which led to increased activism and political organizing within the Lakota community. These days, the Lakota continue to face many challenges, like high rates of poverty and unemployment within the community, as well as ongoing threats to their sovereignty and land rights. But there are also many initiatives and movements within the Lakota community that seek to promote cultural revitalization and empower the next generation of Lakota leaders. Thank you for listening. If you like this and you want to hear more about Native history, please subscribe to the channel. Thank you.